you're lying to yourself. You may tell yourself that you're afraid to slow down, afraid to retire, because you'll become bored. You'll lose your edge. You'll stop feeling productive. But what if that isn't what you're truly afraid of? What if you're afraid that when the meetings stop, your phone goes silent, and no one needs anything from you, that you'll finally have to feel everything that your success has helped you to avoid? The growing distance in your marriage, the guilt of realizing how much of your children's lives you actually missed, the health warnings and signals and red flags that you continue to avoid, ignore, and override, the grief, resentment, fear, insecurity, anxiety, and exhaustion that you've spent decades sweeping under the rug. This is why the thought of retirement, the thought of slowing down, can feel so threatening. It isn't always about the fear of what will I do? How will I spend my time? It's more often about the fear you'll experience related to having nothing to hide behind. Because slowing down isn't what creates the pain, the challenge, the internal friction. What it does is create enough silence for you to finally hear the insecurity, anxiety, fear, resentment, and grief you've been hiding from all along. Today, we're going to talk about what your busyness may be protecting you from and why you cannot afford to wait until retirement to finally confront it. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstuck High Performer podcast. My name is Paul Salter. I'm your host and a mindset and performance coach, as well as a high performance hypnotherapist. And I work with clients just like you who are afraid to slow down, who outside of their business success are suffering with anxiety, fear, grief, guilt, insecurity, resentment, and unable to finally experience the joy, peace, and fulfillment they thought pouring themselves into their business would actually create. And if you even heard an inkling of yourself in that description, in the introduction to today's conversation, well, you're in the right place. And today, I'm going to use retirement as a very relatable example, but I want to make very clear, slowing down in general on both the macro level of retirement and even the micro level of the vacations, the evenings, and the weekends, all of this is relatable and applies. And I'll address that in greater detail as we continue throughout. The key point I want you to understand as we begin building our conversation together is you may tell yourself you're afraid of retirement because you'll be bored, lose your edge, you'll no longer feel productive. But underneath that fear may be something much deeper. It's that when the work finally stops, you'll be left alone with everything the work helped you avoid. Retirement itself doesn't necessarily create the marital tension, distant relationships with your kids, the health problems, or emotional pain. It removes the noise that kept you from noticing them. I was speaking with a new client recently, a man in his late 50s who told me that he could have retired several years ago. In fact, of his closest 5 friends, he was the only one still working. So I asked him why. And at first, he gave me several valid, albeit expected answers. He loves what he does. He wants to leave the business in the best possible position before handing it off. He also doesn't really know what he would do with all of the 50 or 60 hours he would get back every single week. And I believed him. But as I continued to press, like I always do, it became clear that those weren't the only reasons holding him back from finally slowing down to enjoy the life he had worked so hard to build. Sure, retirement would mean figuring out how to fill his days without all of that work. But it would also mean spending considerably more time with his wife and confronting the distance and disconnection that had quietly developed between them. It would mean he'd have the time and the space to address the fact that the word divorce had been thrown around previously. The idea of separation had been minimally discussed. Retirement also meant confronting the distance in his relationship with his 3 children. To this point, he had carried and buried a lot of guilt, shame for his absence during their childhood. It would also mean no longer being able to use his schedule to avoid taking care of his health. And by his own estimation, he was nearly 40 pounds overweight. Work hadn't provided purpose, success, and financial security on their own. It had also become an escape and an excuse. And as long as he kept working, he could postpone confronting what had been neglected. But once the work stopped, then what? Listen, whether you're on the verge of retirement or you're still in the midst of your career, your work has served as an escape. And for years, maybe for decades, work has given you more than income, achievement, and purpose. It's also given you this socially acceptable way to escape, avoid, or numb the challenges going on in your life. Your work has allowed you to avoid difficult conversations with your wife, to explain your absence from your children as sacrifice. You're providing for them. You're creating the life you never had. Work's allowed you to override exhaustion and ignore red flags and signs that your health is declining. It's allowed you to postpone grieving losses you never processed and to escape feelings of inadequacy and insecurity through achievement. This is why slowing down can feel so threatening. You're not necessarily afraid of having nothing to do. You may be afraid of having nothing left to hide behind. And I want you to think about your current work habits, your busyness, the amount of time you spend at the office as a form of emotional anesthesia. Work can function like a painkiller. It doesn't resolve what hurts, it just temporarily makes it harder to feel. Every meeting, deadline, trip, notification, business emergency, it pulls your attention outward rather than inward. And as long as something outside of you requires a response, you don't have to pay attention to what's happening inside of you. And the danger is that avoidance often gets rewarded. The more you work, the more successful you appear. The less you feel, the more composed you appear. The more you sacrifice, the more committed you appear. And the more responsibility you carry, the more indispensable you feel. This makes work one of the easiest avoidance strategies to defend because everyone congratulates you for doing it. It's not only socially acceptable, it's socially rewarded. It's socially admirable. Your coping mechanism, however, may have built you an impressive career, but it doesn't mean it's going to build you a fulfilling life. So whether we're talking about retirement or slowing down, both on the macro and the micro, each removes the structure that once helped you avoid yourself. Retirement in particular represents more than an end of a career. It's also a loss of a title who told you who you were, a calendar that told you where to be, a team that needed you, a loss of a scoreboard that provided value and self-worth, a loss of a reason to leave the house, a loss of a justification as to why your relationship, your kids, received less of you. Many people say, and likely you have had this thought, I would know what to do with myself if I retired. And that language in itself is critical. With myself. The deeper question may not be, what would I do all day? It may be, who am I when I'm no longer needed, producing, or achieving? And for many people, retirement can serve as this form of an emotional audit. It can become the moment when the accounts you neglected finally demand your attention. The marriage account, the parenting account, the health account, both physically and emotionally, the identity account. You can retire from your job. However, you cannot automatically retire from the consequences of how you lived your life while building a career. And the point I want to ensure doesn't get lost is that slowing down or retirement doesn't create the pain. It simply makes the pain audible. When someone finally slows down, they may experience anxiety, irritability, sadness, restlessness, emptiness, internal conflict, a loss of identity, which makes it really easy to draw the conclusions that I'm not built to slow down. Rest makes me depressed. I just need to stay busy. Retirement would destroy me. But slowing down may not be the cause. It may simply just remove the distraction. Silence isn't creating the noise inside you. Silence is finally allowing you to hear it. And that distinction is crucial. Because if you believe slowing down is the problem, you'll respond by speeding back up. If you understand that slowing down is revealing the problem, you can finally address what has been asking for your attention all of these years. Let's talk about how this might show up and appear in some of the big areas of your life. In your marriage, work can protect you from intimacy by keeping you too occupied to examine what has actually disappeared. And for many years, you may shift into coordinating rather than connecting. Who's picking up the kids? What time is dinner? What bills need to be paid? What extracurriculars are on the calendar this weekend? When's your next business trip? And gradually you shift from this honeymoon phase of passionate love into becoming efficient business partners managing a household while slowly becoming strangers with one another. And then retirement arrives. And suddenly you're in the same house, you're empty nesters, there's fewer logistical problems to solve and discuss, and nowhere to escape from the emotional distance. And that tension might feel and sound like, I don't know how to talk to my wife anymore. She's just always there in my space. Everything I do seems to irritate her. We have nothing in common, while also having the lingering sadness around, I thought this was when we were finally going to enjoy each other. Here's what I need you to understand. Retirement didn't create that distance. It exposed a distance that busyness had made easier to tolerate. I mean, imagine spending 30 years saying, once the business is stable, we'll travel. Once the kids are out of the house, we'll reconnect. Once I retire, I'll finally be present. You believe that you're postponing the relationship. But relationships don't remain frozen while you're away from them. Your wife is adapting, building a life, and learning not to need you. And when you finally become available, you discover that availability is not the same as intimacy. You cannot instantly access a connection that you haven't been maintaining. You may also believe that you're working so hard now so you can enjoy your marriage later. But if you repeatedly teach your spouse how to live without you, later may not feel the way you imagine. And I'm taken back to a conversation I had with somebody who, like the individual I'm describing and speaking to, for the last 24 years, he had poured himself into building his law practice. And this gentleman was incredibly self-aware, a high emotional intelligence. And he remembers feeling and beginning to confront some of the feelings I'm describing, the guilt, the shame, the resentment, the grief about not being as present for his kids, being distant and more like two ships passing in the night with his wife. And although, in his words, that's just what it took, it was the arrangement him and his wife had made from the beginning. He specifically asked his wife the day that his youngest moved out, "Hey, like, do you still like me? Do you want to hang out?" And fortunately for him, his wife did still like him. Where he took an awesome extra step, in my opinion, is he did what he probably should have done a couple decades ago, is he started dating his wife again. They even went to couples counseling together because they were now navigating this new chapter of life. He was finally more available, home and present. The kids were out of the house. They had forgotten what they enjoyed doing together. They didn't know how to necessarily spend time together, to connect mentally, emotionally, and intimately. And fortunately, he was able to take some proactive steps and the action necessary to rekindle and connect and ultimately strengthen his relationship with his wife. Sadly, he's in the minority. And that's why I'm hopeful in listening to this conversation. Not only do some ideas start to percolate, but you find the courage and strength to take action upon them. So let's go back now to really using another popular big area of where all of the busyness and productivity over the years and the decades can create some real friction when you begin to think about slowing down, think about retiring. And it's in your relationship with your children. When you are so fixated on producing and providing, achievement, success, money can provide a noble explanation for your absence. You tell people you're doing this for your family. You tell your kids you're doing this to create opportunities that you never had. You might even tell them that they'll understand when they're older. And although some of that might be true, it's not going to have nearly the same impact as actually being present with your children. Providing for your children and being known by your children are not the same thing. And many make the mistake as they're on the verge of retirement in that they expect to reclaim that lost time. And unfortunately, many individuals go on to discover that their adult children, again, their adult children, now have their own lives, their own routines, spouses, careers, and even children of their own. And their children may love them deeply, but they no longer instinctively turn to dad for connection, for advice. Because dad was never there during their childhood. And the painful realization for you might not simply be my kids grew up, it's that they learned how to live with minimal access to me. So when the work stops, you finally have enough space to feel all of the guilt about the milestones and events you missed. Grief about the years and moments that can't be recovered. Uncertainty about how to connect without just providing advice or money. Discomfort when your own children don't prioritize the relationship between the two of you. Your children may appreciate what your success provided and still grieve what it prevented them from receiving from you. And then thirdly, how does this fear, this pain show up in your own personal health? Look, when you throw yourself into your work, it becomes easy to dismiss and even adapt patterns of poor sleep, chronic tension, digestive issues, weight changes, persistent fatigue. This becomes normal. Reliance on alcohol to take the edge off, stimulants to get going, anxiety masked as drive, irritability that gets labeled as passion and intensity. This all becomes normal to you. Your work provides enough adrenaline and urgency to keep functioning. When the pace slows, however, the accumulated exhaustion becomes impossible to ignore. And some people go on to say, retirement broke me, retirement made me fall apart. But in reality, retirement removed the adrenaline that had been helping that individual outrun just how depleted they already were. So this isn't about beginning to claim or blame every illness caused by repression or by work. What it is about, however, is recognizing that years, decades of stress, neglected self-care, and overridden warning signals, red flags, and signs can create consequences that become much more visible when your life slows down. Your body will eventually ask for everything that you refused to give it voluntarily: rest, attention, sleep, recovery, and care. Now, I have an imagination. You may be feeling a little bit of resistance to what I'm sharing. And if so, I imagine that you may be thinking something similar to, I'm not avoiding anything. I love what I do. My work gives me purpose. I'm just wired this way. I don't want to retire. If I do slow down, if I do retire, who am I? I might lose my edge. And all of those can be true and also incomplete. Like, look, I understand what you're saying. Again, there's some nobility there. So let me ask you the following questions. Can you stop working without becoming anxious? Can you rest without feeling guilty? Can you be present without reaching for stimulation? Can you feel valuable when you aren't producing? Is work something you choose or something you psychologically need in order to feel okay? Loving your work is wonderful, healthy, phenomenal. Needing your work to protect you from yourself is something different. And like I alluded to in the beginning of our conversation today, retirement is a very concrete, tangible, relatable example. But the patterns I've discussed are already visible now. And you don't need to wait until retirement to see the evidence. These patterns, these pains, these challenges, these voices, they may surface on that first day of vacation, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, when the children leave for the weekend, when a major project ends, or during a holiday break. These are just some moments that are previews. They show what happens when the normal avoidance system is interrupted. And I want you to consider this. What reliably surfaces when your life gets quiet? And how quickly do you find something to make it noisy again? Let's talk action. Let's talk solution. Now, again, the solution is not necessarily to retire early, abandon ambition, or become any less successful. The solution is to stop using your success as permission to postpone your inner life. You want to begin creating small, intentional experiences of slowing down now, while you still have time to repair, reconnect, and change. In your marriage, if nothing changes between now and retirement, what kind of relationship would be waiting for you? Begin having the tough conversations that have nothing to do with logistics. Take action. Find the courage to be vulnerable. Address anything that's causing resentment before it hardens into indifference. Create time together. Prioritize time together without phones, children's, or work. And learn how to be emotionally present, not merely physically available. When it comes to your children, let me ask you this. Are you building memories with them or mostly funding their experience from a distance? Get curious about their inner world. Create specific one-on-one time with each of your children that has nothing to do with results or performance. Simply listen without immediately advising, coaching, correcting, or fixing. Apologize for specific absences rather than defending your intentions. And build rituals of connection. When it comes to your own physical health, what has your body been asking for that your ambition keeps overruling? You need to stop interpreting every signal as an inconvenience. You need to prioritize some form of exercise, a minimum of 3 days per week. Hire the personal trainer, get the accountability. Audit your relationship with food, booze, stimulants, stress, and treat rest and recovery as an integral part of your performance plan. And I want to share one key exercise that, if you actually complete, will be of immense value for you. I want you to retire before you retire. And what I mean is, take a full day. No work, no email, no errands, no productivity projects, no numbing distractions. And simply observe. What emotions surface? What does your mind urge you to do? What feels uncomfortable about slowing down, being unavailable? What are you drawn to do? Or tempted to avoid? What physical sensations do you finally notice in your body? What story do you tell yourself about why you should get back to work? In doing this, the goal isn't to prove to yourself that you can sit still. The goal is to discover what busyness has been managing for you. You don't need to stop being ambitious. You don't need to retire tomorrow or walk away from work that you genuinely love. But you do need to ask whether your work is helping you build a meaningful life or helping you avoid one. Don't wait until retirement to discover that your marriage has become a partnership of logistics. Your children have learned to live without you. Your body has absorbed decades of neglect, and you no longer know who you are without a title or a scoreboard. Do the work beneath the work now. While there is still time to repair what has been neglected, to reconnect with the people you love, and make what matters most matter now. And if slowing down feels threatening because you know what might come to the surface, you don't have to confront it alone. This is exactly the type of work that I help my clients navigate. And if you're ready to understand what you've been running from and to build a life you no longer need to escape from, I invite you to use the link in the show notes to reach out and apply for one-on-one private coaching. Thank you for listening to this conversation. I know there is somebody in your inner circle who needs to hear today's message. Please share it with him or her. And you taking 30 seconds to leave a genuine rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify has a much more meaningful impact than you may imagine. So please hit pause, leave that rating and review. Make the rest of your day fantastic, and I'll catch you in the next episode.